Hello and welcome back to the Excedo Playback Podcast, the podcast discussing industry news, trends, and tech advancements in the streaming and OTT industry. I'm your host, Neil Van Zyl. Today we're going to be covering a few topics. Joining us today is Tommy Flanagan, editor of Faultline and host of the Faultline podcast. Tommy, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
And back at it again is my occasional co-host, Mrugesh Desai, Excedo's VP of North America. Mrugesh, good to see you.
Thanks, Neil. Always great to be on.
I mentioned we're going to be tackling a few topics. The first is profitability and cost. Innovation in the streaming industry has been muted over the last year or two. The focus on profitability has become extremely apparent as you look at the industry and especially at the streaming leaders. Navigating this has become difficult and requires tremendous effort. However, differentiation remains important, so companies must balance the need to innovate and the need to remain cost efficient. Mrugesh, what do you see as the best means for service profitability and cost efficiency for OT services in the short term?
I think probably the first step is really auditing how you do things today, right? Many of the OTT services, when they initially launched, had a certain way of doing things. It might have been building a lot of the services in-house. It might have been scaling up operationally. So over the last 18 months to 24 months, I think we've actually seen services self-audit themselves, really start digging into how they're actually running the operation, where they're spending their money, how they're sort of building up the technology stack. And I think that sort of self-reflection is leading to conversations about cost efficiency with vendors like ourselves and others. But I really think that's sort of the first step in realizing, how you can actually improve efficiencies within your service today.
Tom, any other thoughts there?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say I'm quite surprised I've been invited on this podcast, to be honest, after your CEO came onto the Faultline podcast. And within the first couple of minutes, I read a quote from an old article that described him as an unbearable Swedish entrepreneur. So I was expecting to come on to this and have one of you avenge your boss, but anyway, in answer to your question, I mean, you only need to spend sort of 5 minutes at any trade show, any conference to know that the main focus is money and profitability. That's true for both the video service providers and, of course, the supplier ecosystem for companies like Excedo as well. Obviously, Excedo, I understand, quite well positioned financially, even as a non-public company, but still vendors are making cuts and looking for cost savings. And it seems to me, the industry is flowing towards this natural sort of crescendo to more consolidation, of course, and focusing on more niche strategies. So seeing service providers look at the kind of lower hanging fruit, and the same is true of vendors, looking at the sort of lower hanging fruit and emerging streaming services, because the major accounts, like the big pay TV operators, they're drying up. And I'm pretty sure we've had this debate before, Mrugesh, and it's one of those where we're going to have to agree to disagree, because fundamentally, I think in the future, consumers are not going to get TV from what we know today as traditional pay TV operators. And I know, of course, the Excedo customer base, there are a lot of large pay TV operators in there. So you might have a different stance, but that's my stance, and I stand by it. And that most operators in the future will see legacy TV distribution infrastructure as a costly burden that's withering on the vine, and that ultimately is going to be one of the areas where companies are going to save costs. So that's my opening rant for you.
Are either of you seeing differences in some of your discussions? Obviously, you talked with a lot of C-suites, both of you. How I guess the ecosystem or the businesses in the industry are viewing OTT applications in general?
I think one of the key topics we're discussing more and more with executives is around experimenting around monetization, right? So they may have had theses around how to go about monetization, and with pay TV operators or D2C brands, I think that has been well established in the past. But now you're seeing these same services think about things like hybrid monetization, think about things like merchandising, think about ancillary experiences beyond content and bringing that into the service. So everyone is looking for new avenues for revenue, and I think that is actually sparking creativity, and frankly, that's very exciting, right? What they thought might be the golden rule in terms of generating revenue and profitability may no longer hold true for their audiences. Netflix was a huge disruptor with respect to this, right? As soon as they introduced the ad-supported service, you've seen many others follow suit. But beyond just, hey, I can introduce an SVOD and AVOD offering, you're seeing folks actually try out things far more creative than that. So if you think of brands like Disney, right? There's obviously their media arm, but you have Disney Cruises, you have whole other aspects of how Disney can create revenue. And could you synthesize that into one digital experience? It's not just Disney who are thinking about these kinds of things. It's many of the other services we're talking to who are thinking about these things similarly.
I'm amazed you didn't jump in and disagree with me there. You just kind of segued straight into the next question. I was like, hang on, aren't you supposed to disagree with me?
We're gonna warm up into that, Tommy. Definitely not gonna come out swinging a bat to start the call.
We run tight ships here.
Yeah, clearly.
Exactly.
Yeah, Michael's trained you well. That Swedish efficiency.
Exactly.
Tommy, so you always get to ask a lot of interesting questions to a lot of interesting people, and I'm sure you have your own thoughts when they give you some answers. But what are some things that the industry you think is paying a bit too much attention to?
Too much attention to? Oh, that's a great question. I don't think I was really prepared for that. I think the easy answer is AI. Of course, the last few years, every kind of stand, every product label had AI at some point, and I came into it extremely, critical, and I found that it's kind of matured to a degree now. Initially, everyone's putting AI on their products just for the sake of it, I thought, and it was these kind of off the shelf AI models that weren't really doing anything. They were just putting it there for the sake of it. They didn't even need to ask customers about deployments and use cases and go, oh well, it's just it's just a test. It's just an experiment at the moment. And now maybe a year, 2 years later, kind of seeing it mature and seeing some real world use cases for AI, specifically Gen AI, and starting to see the kind of disruption around that. But yeah, still far too much attention, I think, by some companies on that area where it could be invested into more pressing matters. But personalization is one of the key ones for me. I'm sort of flipping the question now, but I think that is fundamentally still broken, and I really feel like we're at the cusp of some sort of AI based personalization revolution. Sounds really, really cliche, but I do think it's coming. And look at TikTok, look at something like Spotify DJ. You ever use that feature? I use that every single day. It's like my little kind of companion. Why don't we have something like that for TV? Where's the app, TV app DJ? Why aren't these services incorporating these freely available AI features? I mean, I don't know. You guys might tell me otherwise. You're the app developers. You might be saying this, but from where I'm sat, I think the TV world is way behind, despite what I've just said about the over focus on AI.
No, I would actually agree with Tommy. And as a segue to what he said, I think there's an overemphasis on content quantity than quality, right? So you could absolutely create and maintain a smaller catalog if you actually had the right type of personalization, the right type of TV app DJ available to you. And get better bang for your buck. So many of the services who come out, there's sort of an oversaturation with content that, frankly, people just don't watch, and that costs a lot of money, and honestly leads to a lot of user fatigue. Right? I mean, you get onto the services and you're browsing and browsing and browsing and not figuring out anything compelling to watch, which is very unfortunate. So I think we're going to see that come back around. Frankly, because of profitability challenges, which I think is going to be a boon to just thinking a little bit more consciously about the type of catalog you put out there. But to Tommy's point, I think there's the right type of innovation that can come about with TV services. I think often about the social media platforms, and they're very much like a blank canvas, right? When you think of an Instagram or TikTok, both the user experience and content experience when you launch those services is absolutely tailored exactly to you. TV apps and content at large is still very much a curated experience for the masses. But I hope and I think that is actually going to change.
You guys actually beat me to my next question. I was going to ask you where should the focus be going, but you've already answered that one.
Yeah, I run a tight ship, you see. Not the only ones.
Jumping back to obviously like profitability and earnings, Netflix's recent earnings showcase why it's still the leader in global OTT. Is there any lessons that smaller content providers or broadcasters should or shouldn't take from Netflix? And I mean, maybe it is just the personalization example.
I'm very glad you brought this up, actually, because I don't know whether you're referring to Netflix's full results or the advertising blog post they put out.
Their full results.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure about the sort of turnaround for your podcast. When I'm talking about what happened this week, it might be out of date by the time this goes out. But yeah, Netflix this week, I just wanted to mention this week, it said it had 70 million active users on the ad-supported tier. But there are a few things that people missed. I'm pretty sure when Netflix says it's counting 70 million active users, I'm pretty sure it's counting the number of profiles as well in that count, not just the households. Netflix hasn't said that. It's just a kind of assumption, because obviously it needs to inflate that number for advertisers. And the other thing is that Netflix with ads is still only available in 12 countries. So they were celebrating 2 years since launch, when they launched back in November. What year is it? 2024. So they launched in November 2022 in 12 countries. 2 years later, it's still only available in 12 countries. And people are sort of celebrating this 70 million figure. But if you really look into the results in the earnings call and you go into the transcript, the executives are moaning about the ad business and saying that it's not growing fast enough. And I wonder if it's not growing fast enough when, it's still only in 12 countries. And I mean, part of that is because Netflix has just, ripped and replaced its whole ad tech stack and replaced it with a proprietary system. Of course, there are a whole bunch of other, intricacies with advertising. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that point about Netflix, and I've forgotten the original question now.
Good point. Just asking if there's any lessons you think that others can take from that others should or shouldn't take from Netflix right now.
Well, yeah, I think there are some lessons in that statement, and in not to source your ad tech stack from Microsoft Xandr in the first place, because that clearly didn't work, and also to, Netflix is doing a very slow touch approach to its ad rollout, which may pay dividends in the future. I think you need to do it slowly, but executives and investors are getting impatient. 70 million sounds great, but from what I understand, it's still not washing its own face, or with the focus on profit. I don't think it's making enough money yet, and it does need to expand further. But yeah, I think the lessons are that I'm a very impatient person, so I'm always going to criticize people and companies for doing things too slowly. But sometimes that's a necessary evil for success. Unfortunately, that's a really unexciting answer, isn't it? Do things slowly and carefully.
I'll provide a perspective from a technology and innovation perspective. But yeah, recently I stumbled upon a new feature Netflix launched. So you're able to actually share a specific clip from a piece of content you're watching through social media to your friends, right? It's a very peer-to-peer type of organic recommendations workflow that they've created. These types of things are not uncommon at Netflix, where they're sort of trying new things from a user experience perspective. They were one of the first in the industry to actually start publishing a technology blog, actually sharing the quote unquote trade secrets, right? So even in terms of how they determined content thumbnails, they have a fairly sophisticated way of doing that to ensure that engagement is actually something they prioritize when people are trying to click through and select content. So I think these sort of mini experiments they do, which oftentimes I think come out from a perspective of, hey, we have a hunch on this being successful, but let's put it out there to the masses. I definitely think more services should do more and more of that. And then even in terms of content innovation, right? This evening, you're going to be watching Mike Tyson fight Jake Paul on their platform, right? So they're sort of jumping into live events, live sports. This is not their forte. They probably don't have the right operational arm to handle live events. But they're very, very curious in terms of how this content differentiation is going to impact their platform. Without sort of a full commitment, right? So they do these experiments, they see what sticks, and then you'll see further investments in these areas.
I've just had a quick Google out of curiosity, and that fight is going to be about 4 a.m. my time tomorrow morning. Which actually I could be awake depending on what time the kids wake up. So yeah, maybe I'll put that on in the morning. But yeah, you were talking about the Moments feature, right? Netflix Moments.
Exactly.
And it was only I think this week or maybe last week that Amazon Prime Video has come out with a copycat feature, the X-ray recaps. That provides spoiler-free summaries of shows, episodes, blah 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 blah, powered by Amazon Bedrock AI. So yeah, that's a bit of a trend there.
I've been having a lot of fun with that feature.
I've not tried it yet. Any good?
Yeah, I mean, it does the job. If you're trying to reference something and someone doesn't get it, you just say, "1 sec, let me grab it for you really quick."
I'm not even sure it's available in the UK yet. To be honest, you guys always get the cool stuff first.
I guess we're a little lucky. Let's switch gears a little bit. We'll talk a little bit platform expansion. When it comes to video service planning, what is your advice in terms of device expansion strategies? Like, where should services start? Where should they expand to next?
I mean, it may sound obvious, but you need to be where your audiences are. And it's a very tall order getting your audiences to come to where you want them to come. So from that perspective, if you think about the last decade of OTT streaming, it's become ever more fragmented. There was a stat put out there a couple of years ago around U.S. Content consumers, and the average household has something like 6 different device platforms on average available to them. They may not use all of them consciously, but between your smart TV and your set-top boxes and your OTT devices and your mobile devices, that's what you have proliferated into your household. So to not have content available on all these platforms, definitely puts you behind the 8 ball. Now, if you're thinking sort of international expansion, you do need to be a little bit more nuanced in terms of your thinking, right? The platforms that may be popular in the United States may not be popular in other countries, and you have to sort of think about the right prioritization wherever your audience is actually going to come from. So, for example, you take a platform like Roku, unbelievably popular, obviously in the United States. Growing a great footprint in countries like Canada, the UK, Brazil, etc. But if you want to launch that service in a Southeast Asian country, and that's where your primary audience is, that may not be the right platform to prioritize. So you need to think about the geographical differences. But generally speaking, it's not uncommon for services to go out the gate launching on at least a dozen different disparate OTT platforms. And I think fragmentation is here to stay, right? If you sort of take a look at the extended reality part of the equation, a very similar thing is happening. You've got multiple players; they have very different tech stacks. It's unclear if there'll be just one or two players who sort of win the race and this consolidation. So at least for the foreseeable future, I don't think fragmentation is going to take a backward step. So short answer, I think, to your question is you got to be on all the platforms. And the good part is there are definitely a subset of these platforms that do actually share somewhat of a common tech stack, right? So if you think about smart TV platforms, there's sort of technological advancements from ourselves and others whereby you can launch on device X, right? And if you need that extensibility to actually get onto similar platforms, rival platforms actually, you can do so with economies of scale and without sort of rebuilding completely from scratch.
Wouldn't life be easier for the video service providers, the app providers, if there was more consolidation and the TV OS platform world wasn't so fragmented? Surely this is costing them more money. The more fragmented it gets, the more TV OS launches we see, and surely the Netflixes of the world will be driving and pushing for consolidation. Because I'm glad you brought that point up, because there are some people who think that the TV OS world is destined to follow the mobile and PC world and be reduced to a duopoly, iOS and Android, and Mac and Windows. And in TV, people think that'll be Google and Roku inevitably. I don't really agree to that extent, but I do believe that the TV space is way, way behind the curve, and the TV OS is ripe for consolidation, and there are too many, and it's too fragmented. But yeah, I'm curious to know whether you see the video service providers, because you work with them, whether they're pushing for consolidation, whether fragmentation is a headache for them.
Fragmentation is definitely a headache for them, which is why Excedo can sort of be successful what we do. Is it the best thing for consumers? Absolutely not. To not have a ubiquitous setup in the living room, and devices can't actually work very well with each other across the different OEMs. It's not a great situation for consumers. And sort of to your question, all the big players I think have tried very, very hard and have been very unsuccessful. So we can only go by that sort of track record, and the fact that newer platforms continue to emerge. I don't know how many CESs I've been to where you get there and you're suddenly surprised by some type of new TV OS or CTV platform or something to that effect being launched. And you're like, how are these guys going to be successful? Like, how are they going to carve out a niche in this industry? And a few years later, they seem to be thriving. They have a little bit of a niche. They may have differentiated based on a very cheap price point. They may have differentiated based on a user experience paradigm. But we continue to see these things emerging. And I even remember a decade ago, right? Back then, Roku was punching well above its weight, even more so than they do today. And it just seemed like the clock was ticking, right? Like, hey, someone's got to acquire them. There's no way they're going to be able to compete with an Apple TV and a Fire TV, and they held their own. And in fact, other players became encouraged to enter the race, seeing their success. So, unfortunately for consumers, I think it's here to stay for a while, until something very, very disruptive happens in the M&A market. So, for example, Walmart acquiring Vizio. That won't have a big effect on the fragmentation, but if you can imagine competitors, rival OEM competitors, swooping in for each other, then you can sort of start seeing this. But the pressure from the sort of services themselves, I think, are acknowledged without really being acted upon.
Yeah, Roku just keeps defying all expectations. The Wall Street analysts were left like totally red-faced after the last results that it smashed. But let's reskin that question. Could Excedo survive in a dystopian future with a TV duopoly of Google and Roku? Could Excedo still survive in that market?
Absolutely. The way I sort of actually think about our pie is very much sort of X by Y matrix, right? On one hand, we are fueling our business based on device fragmentation, but that other axis is actually based on content differentiation, right? So, we traditionally used to work with broadcasters and operators, but we've made forays into healthcare video solutions, hospitality video solutions, sports, fitness, OTT, etc. So, to your point, if the device fragmentation actually contracted, we can still fuel our growth actually based on all the content differentiation that is increasingly being invested in the industry and areas where we've both organically but also inorganically by way of acquisition invested in. So while I think fragmentation is here to stay, we're certainly not just banking on it. I think there's other ways to actually sustain the growth of our company.
All right, and you work directly with the OEMs, right, as well as as well as the service providers. Yeah, what do the OEMs want? What are their kind of demands for features to differentiate from the Android TVs and the Rokus of the world?
I think the great part is they're all very much data driven. They're looking at the ways their users actually want to leverage their platforms. So not to pick on Roku, but to highlight them again. Just at the developer conference back in October, they talked about launching multi-view support. Right? I mean, it's traditionally not something Roku has supported. They've had devices that are low cost, but low cost comes with certain types of performance and memory specifications. But they've taken strides to actually improve upon that, start providing more enhanced features like multi-view that other platforms support. I think they're very much taking a very user-centric approach to improving their platforms, and it's happening across the board. So I think that's exciting because when we think about launching a service, one of the frustrations a service can have is, look, we have amazing content and we want to have a very innovative user experience to match that. But when they start thinking about the dozen or so device platforms out there, they suddenly start realizing that, hey, not all things are equal. Some of these platforms can do more than others. Now, does it make sense to take a lowest common denominator approach, or can we actually be, consistently providing a very highly sophisticated, innovative user experience? And the OEM platforms, while not colluding, are at least sort of pushing each other to sort of jump up that ladder. So Roku's or smart TV platforms, they're looking at the abilities of a gaming console or abilities of a platform like Apple TV, and are certainly playing catch up very, very quickly. So for us, that's exciting, and for the service providers, I think that's great because they don't have to sort of settle on sort of a low common denominator approach.
Oh, you're so well PR trained, aren't you? Helen will be proud. Sorry to derail your line of questioning, Neil, but yeah.
No, it's good actually, and because Tommy, I believe after IBC, you actually wrote a little bit of an article about multi-view, did you not?
Oh yeah, I've written a few since, and recently interviewed a company called Tiled Media, but yeah, they kind of walked me through the kind of traditional approach to multi-view from an encoding kind of point of view. Won't go into the sort of gory details of encoding here today, but they've got quite a different approach. And the demo I've seen, it's only a prototype app at this stage, but it is pretty impressive, and there's clear demand, and everyone's following suit with multi-view support. So yeah, we're going to see some disruption there, and I'm promised there will be some customer announcements very shortly, because we're still not seeing very many. So yeah, some of the big guys already support it, but most of them are kind of only two. When you and some can support kind of 8, 9. I'm not really sure if consumers really want that, but the support is there if people need it. And Excedo presumably is seeing demand from customers for multi-view. Is that kind of in the top 5 at the moment?
Absolutely. Amongst the sports providers, absolutely. And great shout out for Tiled Media there. I love Rob and the team, and them and others are pushing that industry forward.
Tommy, are you planning on attending CES, or are you just going virtually?
No, I've only been to CES once. I think it was maybe CES 2017. I think so. I was about 25 and quite overwhelmed by the whole thing, to be honest. And I haven't been back since. It was just for me. I found it quite difficult to kind of cut through the noise. It is the largest consumer electronic show in the world, so it is, as you know, very overwhelming. And I found it hard to kind of focus and cut through that noise and see the people I wanted to see and get the stories that I wanted to get because there was so much going on. So I think one Las Vegas visit a year is enough for me. So yeah, it's NAB is the show for me in Vegas. So no, I won't be attending. Maybe in the future when I'll go my maybe 10-year anniversary or something. But yeah, you guys have a big presence there normally.
I wouldn't say big presence, but we have a presence every year. We tend to do a suite experience, so we can talk a little bit more candidly. We can show our innovations that haven't actually seen the light of day, and get that in front of some of our customers and partners. We'll be attending. Actually, Neil and myself will be there along with one other person. And the suite experience is very interesting for us because we actually mimic a living room setup, right? So it's how would you experience TV in a living room? It's something we can actually put in front of our customers and our prospects and our partners. We'll be able to actually showcase things we're doing on the extended reality front, and other areas of innovation. But I think this year's CES for us will probably be a little bit of a different focus, and may not necessarily be all the razzmatazz that comes with showcasing new device platforms and innovations in extended reality and that type of thing. But I think a lot of conversations will actually revolve around the realities of the industry and cost efficiency. So managed services has already been a key topic for us over the last few months. And I think a lot of the people we'll be talking to at the show will really want to delve into that. So I think that's going to be a focal area for us.
I can't believe it's taken you this stage of the podcast to mention managed services. Michael is not going to be happy, and I'm sure I'm sure you guys have timed this deliberately because just this week I've had a press release in my inbox from you guys announcing the launch of Quality as a managed service. I thought you were going to go straight in with that as the headline, but I thought I'd bring it up. I didn't write about this week, but might revisit it next week. But yeah, basically, you're outsourcing quality assurance, right? As I get it, and app certification, all about reducing costs, blah blah blah. But I assume this has been launched based on demand from existing customers, right? Otherwise, what's the point? Which tells us that service providers are increasingly comfortable handing over those critical operational functions like QA testing to vendors like Excedo. So I'm just curious, why is that?
The why is fundamentally driven by cost, right? And if there's efficiencies they can gain by going to a vendor who can actually do this at scale. So it's not only going to be QA as a managed services, but we actually think there are other modular managed services that we can provide to services around the world. So on the QA front specifically, just to sort of delve a little bit more into the weeds. QA in our industry has long been thought about in terms of a manual effort, right? It's actually eyeballs on screens, playing around with remote controls, figuring out what's wrong. That is still important, but you can introduce automation. You can introduce device labs that can be accessed virtually. So the trifecta of manual testing, automation testing, device labs, and then also doing it in a geographically distributed way where you can take advantage of low-cost locations, frankly, is actually providing our customers with a lot of cost saving. You rightly pointed out sort of receiving the announcements, but we've actually already launched this with a couple of customers who are benefiting from it. There's one significant pay TV operator actually in North America who transitioned the entire internal QA team, who was part of sort of effort who did code testing with us, right? So it's very common in our practice to sort of do vendor-led testing and then user acceptance testing that the customer does. But once they sort of delved into our offering, they actually transitioned the whole shebang over to us, which was great. I mean, with great responsibility comes sort of expectations, but something I think we will be doing a lot more of. And like I said, not just with QA. I think there's possibilities of doing design as a managed service, for doing quality of service sort of offerings as well. So look out for more announcements on this front. We definitely can sort of take on the traditional sort of end-to-end managed services that some services want. But honestly, there are many providers in the industry who have mature tech stacks and need optimizations on a piece of it, a piece of the puzzle, not the full 9 yards. So this particular offering sort of spoke to those types of needs.
The other thing about managed services I wanted to ask is whether, and this new product in particular, is whether it can scale. Because one thing about managed services, one concern is whether it has really been shown to effectively handle live streaming in particular at scale. And I'm not sure we've seen managed services tested to the extreme, really, and whether live sports could be therefore sort of Achilles heel of managed services. I'm sure you get that question a lot from customers. So yeah, I'm just curious what you tell them.
What's important from our perspective is to tell them about our capabilities today and our capabilities of tomorrow, right? So when it comes to live sports and saying that we're managed services ready for the use cases that come with hyperscale and a very demanding user base, I think that would be a bit of a fallacy, right? We have to take a crawl, walk, run approach. So we're cutting our teeth currently on managed services for what I would call more classic entertainment services. Very recently, we actually signed up also a new service in North America where we're doing managed services for. So we are going to slowly but surely get off our training wheels when it comes to live event support in the managed services context. And then eventually we'll be ready for live sports for the masses and kind of managing those types of content services. So I think there's no perfect answer when it comes to a be all end all type of offering for any type of content service out there. But we're slowly but surely sort of enhancing our skill sets. And we're also not doing this alone, right? So with our managed services offering, even though there's a lot that Excedo will directly own, there are certain key partners, for example, around quality of service, including partners like New Relic, that we're bringing to the table to complement what we can do well and what we can't do directly. So that's sort of how we're approaching things. It's very much going to be a crawl, walk, run type of approach.
What I like about Excedo is you haven't been shy about the whole managed services approach. It's for some companies who I've had this conversation with, they've been a little bit more kind of standoffish because it can be a contentious subject, right? If a large service provider is shifting to a managed services approach, 24/7 managed services, that could mean gutting their entire in-house technology team, potentially hundreds of job losses. So, it can be a touchy subject when real people's livelihoods are involved. But of course, the rise of managed services, that means companies reduce capex, they free up resources to do whatever it is they do best. So yeah, the pros and cons, but yeah, I kind of appreciate that that approach from Excedo. And your boss saw TV apps coming years before anyone else did. So yeah, but I'll always be that little part of me that thinks, yeah, Michael knows what's going on in the future. He must have a time machine.
He is certainly somewhat of an oracle for our industry. So in Michael we trust.
You should rename the podcast In Michael We Trust.
Exactly.
It's a good name. Feels like a good spot to wrap up here, unless you guys have anything else that you want to mention.
I'll just appreciate Tommy being on. And if you change your mind about CES, then hopefully we'll see you there. Otherwise, Neil, myself, and the wider team will also be at NAB in April next year, also in Vegas. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have to sort of do Vegas twice a year at least. You're in North America, but for good reason. CES and NAB are two good reasons.
Yeah, nice. I guess I should do a quick plug for my company, my publication. Rethink Faultline is turning 23 next year, so it's quite old. So yeah, we're going to celebrate by launching our new managed services offering. Just kidding. We're trying to improve our website and trying to unlock the power of our extensive archive. I speak to a lot of people about how we've got 23 years of worth of industry intelligence and how it's a treasure trove, but it's difficult to kind of unlock that. So that's something we're looking at in terms of coverage. I want to produce more videos. I want to do more things like this, more podcasts. We know that people are reading less. I spend most of the week writing, but people are reading less. So we need to stay relevant. I slate people who say this to me in interviews. I interview a lot of people, and a lot of people tell me that they don't have any competition. But honestly, our biggest competition doesn't really come from other publications, because it still surprises me how little competition we have, and how few publications produce the kind of quality and quantity and depth of coverage that Faultline produces week in, week out. It's exhausting, by the way. And so our kind of biggest threat comes from people not reading or not having the time to read. We're all battling for engagement at the end of the day. And the other thing, I must plug the Bristol Media and Entertainment Mixer, which, of course, Exceedo represented at our very first one earlier this year. And we're doing our next one Thursday, the 5th of December in beautiful Bristol in the west of England. So come along. It's going to be a big OTT wrap-up, 2024 OTT wrap-up. So, yeah, that's my plug done. Thanks for that.
Appreciate it, Tommy. Great to have you on the podcast. And I'm sure this will not be the last discussion we're going to be having together. So looking forward to our next chat.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me, guys. That was fun.
All right, that's it for the podcast. Thank you again to Tommy for joining. It was great to have you on. And always thanks, Mrugesh, for jumping on. There's obviously lots to discuss when it comes to cost efficiencies across the industry, as well as just general trends and tech advancements, especially around the approach to managed services. If you'd like to read a little bit more from Tommy, feel free to check out the link in the description of this episode. We'll throw a link to Faultline in there. That's all for this episode. If you have any questions and you'd like to reach out, please send us an email at playback.podcast@exceedo.tv or reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's all for this time. Thanks.